This episode is supported by FX's Grotesquerie, a new series from executive producer Ryan Murphy. Heinous crimes unsettle a small community, and the local detective feels these atrocities are eerily personal, as if someone or something is taunting her. Starring Niecy Nash-Betts, Courtney B. Vance, Leslie Manville, and Travis Kelce. FX's Grotesquerie premieres September 25th on FX. Stream on Hulu.
Welcome, everyone, to the G-Note Podcast. I am your host, as usual, Jason Spicy G. Goldman, and I'm a Grammy-winning record producer, arranger, and musician. I've been a music professor at USC for over 22 years, and I am most known for writing and producing music for the iconic Michael Bublé over the past 20 years. This is a podcast for musicians who want advice and strategies on navigating the music industry. If you're not a musician but a music fan, I promise there's plenty in here for you as well. On this pod, we talk all things music. On today's pod, we are talking about how you can best prepare to record in a recording studio. Let's go. What is happening, folks? Welcome back to the pod. Today, we are talking about how to get prepared to record in a recording studio. We all know that in, today's music industry, many records are, quite frankly, they're just recorded in home studios. I mean, that's really where a lot of music is being recorded now, especially when it comes to specific genres like pop music and even hip hop, mostly because most of that material in those genres is sample-based or programmed. So there's really not much need to go into a recording studio and spend, a crap load of money. However, to all those audiophiles out there, fear not. For, many genres of music, the recording studio is still a necessity. And it's not just for cool pictures either. I mean, I know we all love to take pictures in front of the board and in the tracking room, but it's more than that. Recording studios are still very much in need, especially for genres like jazz, classical, rock music. The genres that typically rely on organic vibes and great sounding rooms, as well as being in the same room with people so you can get the vibe. Recording studios vary greatly in price. Everyone knows their friend that charges a couple $100. You can get a cheap studio usually for like $500 a day, with kind of minimal gear. Or you can go over to the top pro studios, which can run you $3,000, $3,500 a day sometimes. Super expensive. These studios usually charge by the hour and have, a minimum hourly rate. You have to do like 3-4 hours minimum. But of course, your best bang for your buck is doing something called a lockout, which is that you lock out the studio for 12 hours. Keep in mind, some of that time is used for setup. So, when you're booking the studio, I usually go, well, it's about an hour total for setup and tear down, depending what size group you're dealing with. Back in the day, as you see on like all the videos and documentaries, bands and artists would spend weeks and even months in a studio making an album. You see that like the Beatles documentary, they're just sitting at Abbey Road just for months making an album. However, nowadays, with the exception of a few major artists, that's just rare. It's just too expensive. It just really is. And I've spent many hours at major recording studios, and I have some tips and advice for those of you who are looking to go into a studio. And I know this is really going to help you save you money and get the best results. So here we go. The key to prepping for the studio is, of course, exactly that. Being prepared prior to going into the studio. As we just mentioned, it's super expensive. And you really don't want to waste any time on like small things that could have been done prior to stepping into the studio. You want to spend, as much time on the music as you can. So obviously, before you even book a studio, you should get, number one, you should sit in a room and practice with your band as much as you can. Number one, if it's your band, you're probably not, no one's getting paid. So all you really need is a room. So practice as much as you can to be really, really prepared so that when you go in there, you feel good about the music. But before that, you need to get some quotes from different studios because you don't know which studio necessarily you want to go to. And every studio is different and has a different sound. So I recommend getting 2 to 3 quotes from different studios. You can go to their website. Most of them have, like either a walkthrough or at least a visual. They have gear lists. They have a whole bunch of things on their website. Lots of information now. The things that they don't typically have is the prices, but you just have to email them usually. So look at the websites. Again, I know the gear list can be kind of daunting when you're like, I don't know what a SM7B is compared to a U47. That's fine. Don't worry about that. Those are small details in the beginning. What you want to really do is you want to make sure the room will be satisfactory to what you need. How big is your band? What size room do you think you need? And if you're looking online and you're still confused, just call the studios. Most of the time, they're very happy to talk to you. Incredible gear is awesome, but it doesn't really do much if the vibe's not right for you and it doesn't fit it can't fit the size of your band. So focus on the size of the room and the vibe in the beginning. You want to ask, again, is it the right size? Does it have isolation booths? Right? A lot of times there's isolation booths in these studios for separation. This way, if you need to do something called punching in, right? Let's say the drummer made a mistake. If the drummer's in an isolation booth, we can go and just re-record some of that drum part, maybe just the one part that the drummer felt he or she messed up. They can go back in and fix it without affecting the rest of the recording. Finding out if there's isolation booths. Maybe you don't even need isolation booths. So, why pay for a bigger studio when you don't need that? The next thing to look for is engineers. So most studios do not include a main engineer with their price. They only come with an assistant engineer. And assistant engineers are there to assist. They're not there to run sessions. They're there to help with setup, making sure that everything is operational. They work for the studio. You're allowed to hire any engineer you want for the studio, right? And usually the studio they can make recommendations to you. Sometimes the studios say, hey, this person works with us a lot. You may want to try them, which is great. And honestly, I do recommend using someone that they recommend, provided you do some research on the engineer. As those people typically know the studio inside and out and know, what to do there and what not to do there, meaning that they know the gear that works really well and what has problems. So typically that's a better option. Engineers in general vary in price, and the engineer, to be honest with you folks, the engineer is more important than the room, to be very honest, right? A great engineer can make a crappy or average room sound incredible, but a bad engineer can actually hurt a great room sound if they are not really competent in what they're doing. It does make a difference. The engineer does make a difference. Especially, I recommend you try to get an engineer who works mostly in your genre. Every engineer is going to tell you they can do whatever genre you're in. And they're not wrong. They can do it. But getting an engineer that specifically does a lot of music in your genre can be a game changer because they're used to the sounds you're probably going for and utilize those sounds a lot. And it can really speed up a session, and they can offer advice sonically as to what's happening. So again, try to go for the engineer. Contact people who have used engineers that you like the sound of their recordings, and see if you can get a hold of them. Before going into the studio, as we mentioned, you're going to save tons of money by, again, rehearsing the band a lot. You don't want to go in the studio messing with, and having to deal with like fixing basic things. Oh, I got this chord wrong. I got this chord wrong. These are things that you could have avoided by just getting good rehearsal. So Don't go in there and waste time. That should be rule number one. If your music needs a piano, make sure, of course, your studio has a piano. Don't want to show up there with no piano. But second, it costs money to tune the piano. The studio usually has a piano tuner that they use and that they like, but it will usually cost you around $100 to $200. You're going to want to know that. So, getting into the nitty-gritty of it, I recommend when you are in the studio that you do a minimum of 3 to 4 takes per tune. This is a minimum. Do not, I'm going to repeat this, do not leave there with less than 3 to 4 takes per tune. You will typically not be happy, or if you are, you'll wish you may have had other takes. Maybe there's a noise that went off that you're like, oh my God, I didn't catch that. And sure, maybe it didn't happen in other takes, but maybe there's one chord that's wrong that was played in 2 takes or 3 takes and you didn't fix it till that 4th take, or the piano player didn't want to tell you that. So you definitely want to make sure that you leave there with 3 to 4 takes per song. And even if you have to break it up into sections where you're like, oh, we couldn't run through the entire song 3 to 4 times, just do it in sections. 3 to 4 takes of the intro, 3 to 4 takes of, the first A section or the A section, whatever genre you're recording in. You definitely want to make sure you have enough takes. Typically, by the way, it's going to take about an hour a song to do, 3-4 takes. Again, if it's it's not a very complex song. More complex song, maybe you're talking about 90 minutes a song. But that gives you at least a rough idea. If all goes well, you should have plenty of time for overdubs. Overdubs are recordings basically on top of a recording. So, for example, if I record the drums, bass, and piano in one take, after the selected take, after you find the one that you like, you can do something called overdubbing. So maybe I want to record a sax part, and I can do it separate. This way, I could just keep. I can erase it, or I can choose different parts of my sax take rather than having to do the whole band all over again. This is typically how 95% of vocals are recorded. They're done separate from the band so that they can have complete isolation, and then they can choose the takes that they like the best. One more thing. This is a pro tip. Remember, people are playing on your recording and recording your music. So I'm talking about the musicians and the engineers. And they're all trying to give their best to you. Because remember, it's going to be out there for the world to hear forever. So they want it to be great. You should treat them with as much respect as possible. And I highly recommend, in the morning having bagels and coffee ready for them when they come in, buying them lunch at the studio. I always do that. It's so important to respect both the musicians and the engineers. Again, they're working as hard as they can to make your music come to life. So make sure that they're comfortable and they feel respected. Okay, here's the final checklist, everyone. Just a final rundown. Rehearse prior to going to the studio. Find a studio. Find an engineer. Confirm with your band, engineer, and studio the date and times that work, and then go ahead and book it. We talked about preparing for the recording, any little last-minute details with the music. If you are using a piano, make sure the studio tunes it. Record as many takes as you think is appropriate, as I mentioned, but certainly no less than 3 to 4 takes. That should leave you time for overdubs that need to be done at the studio. This is a couple of last-minute important things. Make sure you bring a hard drive so the engineer can give you all of the sessions that were recorded that day. You want copies. You paid for the recording. You want copies. A lot of studios will also put it on their drive, or they'll put it up in the cloud for you to download. I still always bring a hard drive in. I want the hard copy when I walk out of there of I just spent a ton of money. I want it all on a hard drive. Bring an external hard drive. It'll probably take about a half an hour to get all the information onto the hard drive at the end of the session. So just make sure you're aware of that. And then finally, before you leave, make sure the engineer prints you what's called board mixes. These are just the mixes that he or she has done at the end there, and they're not near the final mixes, but based on everything that happened in the day, you will have something to walk away with and listen to in the car on your way home. And it will make you much happier. Folks, that's all the time we have for today's episode. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this pod so you can stay up to date with new shows, giveaways, and more importantly, the concerts. Folks, I know I'm going to be at the Vibrato very, very soon, and you should come check it out. We always have great singers and guest artists, so check it out at Vibrato Jazz Club. You can also follow me on Instagram at SpicyG Music, or check out my website, jasongoldmanmusic.com, to see what projects I'm currently working on and to see when I'll be performing next. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening. Much love. Peace.